Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jason Phillips, and this is my leadership and management project for EDAD 550. In this project, we were trying to collect information data on the critical activities that administrators do on a regular basis. For my research to get my data, I went ahead and used a Google survey that was used to address different points of the critical activities. So as I went through, I sent this to all of the principals in my district, and I was fortunate enough to get responses from my building at the high school and the middle school administrative staff about how they did it. So I have a survey that with data from 5 different people in 2 different school settings. So I found that very helpful. So as you go through, you can see my general setup for the question was how much time is spent on, and then they had a choice of taking most of my day at 1 all the way down to does not happen every day at 5, and they could fill in between. And I took all 23 critical activities and put them in that kind of a question: how much time is spent communicating with the superintendent, tracking equipment, so on and so forth. And after they answered those 23 questions, I had put a follow-up question with, do you feel that there's a correlation between the amount of time you spend on daily activities and the overall importance the activity is to the function of your building? Please explain. And I asked them to also give me their position and the building that they are working in so that I could track that and kind of see if anything popped up. So when I look at the results that I got, I found that there were some interesting things that I noticed as I go through. And so when I was looking at how much time is spent on planning and conducting faculty meetings, one of the things that stuck out to me from the notes about the leadership versus management is faculty meetings is a prime opportunity to lead. Management isn't necessarily going to focus on that. So I was a little disheartened to see that there wasn't as much emphasis on the planning and conducting on a day-to-day basis, because as the notes point out, you lead people, you manage tasks. So interacting with people is going to be how you lead them, and your faculty is one of the main groups as a principal that you really need to lead to take that next step. So that was a little surprising to see there. As I go down and through, there wasn't a lot of emphasis on school finance, on scheduling. Now that may be a little different come January, February, March, but right now that's not a big deal. Legal issues, not necessarily a big deal right now. Office staff, again, you lead people, manage tasks, and in the office staff, we still see that that's not taking up a lot of their time. So more of just the managing of the staff rather than it is of actually leading them. Communicating with school board members, not a lot of interaction there. Supervising instruction, we see some movement over to where the principals are out there and looking at the instruction, and that's tied to that classroom monitoring. Okay, we saw similar viewpoints of what that meant by the principals in those 2 questions. Record keeping, account management, it's spread out a little bit, but still not something that's heavily emphasized. We haven't got to one of those where I spend most of my days on it. Communicating with the superintendent, not necessarily emphasized. Developing establishing positive relationships with staff. This is where we see some movement. We see one of the principals, and it's the high school principal, it says that takes up most of his day, but all of them value it as at least part of the importance of their day. Inventory, not a lot going on there. Okay. Supervising extracurricular activities, that's kind of spread out, which looking at the 2 sets of administrators were from a high school environment and a middle school environment. There's going to be a lot more extracurricular activities than, say, in an elementary class, so that is going to take up part of their day. Supervising non-certified staff, another place where they could be leading people, and it's not that valued. I found that kind of interesting. I would expect that could be potentially something they want to spend more time on and looking at that management versus leading. How much time is on supplies? Not that much there. Counseling parents. We see a lot of focus on counseling parents and students, that's good because that's interacting with people to potentially lead them and help them along the way. Being visible in the communities right there in the middle. Monitoring the building and school grounds. One of the sub-data points that struck me as kind of amusing is the middle school principal said that this does not happen every day for his responsibilities, but the middle school assistant principal put that it does happen takes up most of their day. So this may be something that he's delegated to her in order to accomplish that task. Spent on fundraising, not much of the day. Disciplining students takes up a significant amount of time. Dealing with irate parents, and a similar situation as the monitoring of the grounds happen here. The high school principal says does not happen every day, the lowest score possible. High school assistant principal says takes up most of their day is dealing with irate parents. So that's something that potentially is on that delegation aspect of the job that the principals have the leeway to do. How they choose to spend their time. Union contract, not necessarily a lot of time. and then spent on testing related issues. Okay, in middle ground, depending on where they were at. So when you look at what they thought the correlation, they all did agree that there is a direct correlation with the time that they spent on activity versus the overall importance. And the high school principal did focus a lot on his response, with consist of managing relationships both within the building staff members and outside the building with parent and district employees. I wanted to follow up with him, so the second part of my research was having a conversation with him in order to have him explain some of his answers and how he valued that. And that led me to some of my conclusions and what was going on with what did I find. Day-to-day activities are more about management than leadership. A lot of reacting to student discipline, reacting to what's going on in the school, or getting out there and supervising your people and making sure they're doing their jobs, especially with the OTES opportunity. Okay, and what I saw is the opportunities for true leadership of focusing on your faculty meetings, focusing on managing your support staff or interacting. That's not necessarily being emphasized by their actions or not taking up much of their time. So to me, that led to the belief that there's more management going on than leadership. The relationships are valued, which does support both systems of management and leadership. But as my principal said when I was talking to him later on about more of his data, that delegation is the key in order to do that. And so his relationships are in order to put people in positions to take care of the tasks that he needs to get done, which to me, that sounds a bit more like a manager trying to divvy up the tasks than it does a leader. He's working within the system to get everything done. He's not revising or making renewals of what's going on there. And then, as I already said, tied reacting to the system rather than being proactive. So when looking at that, I think that the job needs leaders, but on your day-to-day basis, you're going to be managing more than you're going to be leading, and you have to figure out how can you lead. How much time are you going to spend with the faculty meetings? How much time are you going to spend interacting with your staff to foster those relationships with the kids and the community to try to lead and come up with that new material? Okay. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation.